true, that's true.
Easy for listening. I wasn't able to do it.
I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me, that's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are. Hello and welcome to Shadowboxing. Today I got a real shadowboxer on the show. He's not a politician, he's just an everyday person, Scott Bartle. Scott, you took on the Australian government, as I understand.
Yes.
Apart from the government, you also took on the Queen and then also the Governor Generals of Australia. So what's going on? Tell us.
Well, I suppose traces back to the importation of my Chevrolet Corvette from the States.
That beautiful blue car.
Yes, thank you. The first alarm bells sounded with the importation, trying to get the approval from the Department of Transport, which at the time I believed I needed.
But it's usually just a routine thing. So
Yep.
what went wrong with your importation project?
the guidelines that I was presented by the Department of Transport were seemingly straightforward. It asked for evidence of was the car modified to determine the year of manufacture, and if it fell before 1989,
Yes.
to be a classic or a historic, or whether it was after 1989, in which they'd class it as a newly manufactured car. So of course
So
mine
which
was
category is
mine
yours?
was, yeah, well, mine was 1959. It had some restorations done, and I
Beautiful.
argued it's a restored car.
Yes.
And I was citing from the guidelines that were provided, and ultimately those same guidelines that were quoted from on 2 occasions to refuse my import approval were pulled out from me and said, no, you can't rely on those. Now just that alone, to have it cited from and said, no, you can't import because of this paragraph and this paragraph, and then, no, sorry, you actually can't use that document anymore, it's not law, that was just...
Raising the alarm bell for you.
It certainly was.
I heard that they got some problem with your air conditioning.
That came a little bit later.
Oh, later.
Now, ironically, I only learnt about this air conditioning issue once the car was in Australia.
Oh.
Now, it wasn't that... I mean, I was doing my homework and asking what fees and charges were required. So I knew I'd be up for GST, I knew I'd be up for luxury car tax. But my car arrived, and then I get presented with this other one for air conditioning, a pre-charged equipment license. Now, I subsequently found out that there's a lot of people who are actually paying mechanics to go and have the gas removed from their car in order to avoid having to pay this pre-charged equipment license.
Yes.
Or at least that's my belief of the situation. And so I went, well, what's this license actually going to do? I mean, if there are other guys just pulling the gas out, ultimately you're just going to go put the gas back in.
So why do I need a license for that?
What's really happening? And so that was really what pushed me over the edge, that made me start questioning some of these other taxes.
It's not the issue of the money, because you love the car, I believe.
Sure.
So if I like something, I really want to have it here. So I'm prepared to go and pay, but I need to pay. So what have you find in this process alarming? Not the money side, because you can afford it, that's why you're doing it.
Well, that was it. I literally had the check basically written. I'm happy to pay it. And what I started to find was that who I was going to be paying it to wasn't who I thought it was.
Well, how is that? I mean, it's pretty simple, straightforward. We're paying the taxes to the government of Australia. Well, that's not that simple.
There's the starting point. So the first step for me, I actually came across, we look in the Constitution and you look at the name of government, and it clearly says on a number of different places, Government of the Commonwealth.
So the Constitution, we're talking about the Australian Constitution, issued in 1900 in England.
Yes, it's an act of the Parliament of the UK, and within that act is the Constitution that we use here in Australia. Looks like we've got a rule book for government.
Yes.
And in there we see the name for government, and I'm going, well, currently I'm getting mail from this organisation called the Australian Government,
And the Constitution names this one?
Government of the Commonwealth.
It's not even similar.
No.
It is two different things.
The Commonwealth appears to be the people. And so where we see these organisations where the Commonwealth is removed, it's like, is the people being pulled out of that group, that organisation, that thing? And if that's the case, I kept looking and I found the Parliament of the Commonwealth in the Constitution that specifically says there will be a Parliament known as the Parliament or the Parliament of the Commonwealth.
And now how are we calling our Parliament?
Currently in Canberra there's this thing called the Parliament of Australia. Again, the Commonwealth is missing.
Not there. So what's going on in here?
Well,
this is just playing with the words, or the words should have some meaning for us?
One would think that the Constitution is a pretty important document, and that the words that are defined and laid out in there are pretty important.
Should be followed.
They even have a section in the back, paragraph 128, that describes what needs to take place or how you go about altering that Constitution. It shall only be altered in the following manner.
And how can we alter the Constitution?
Well, first thing is that the bill, the proposed bill, has to pass through both houses of the Parliament.
Yes.
Now the question comes up as to which Parliament. Does it pass through the Parliament of Australia, the one currently in Canberra, or does it pass through the one in the earlier part of that document that says the Parliament of the Commonwealth? So there's a few little inconsistencies that are starting to stick out and go, that's not making sense. Let's start asking some questions, and all the way along in my approach with Customs, for example, and various other ministers of the Australian government have been just to ask questions.
About what?
About whether the Australian government is legitimate or whether we should be looking for the government of the Commonwealth.
But they may say to you it's insane to ask this question because it's rather obvious. We are the government, you are our subject, and you do what I'm saying to you, and that's it, end of story.
And yet what if they weren't? What if there was, for example, a company that was called the Commonwealth of Australia that sat in Washington and registered with the Securities Exchange Commission?
In the United States?
There appears to be an entity registered with the Securities Exchange Commission called the Commonwealth of Australia.
In Washington, D.C., in the capital of the United States.
Yeah.
That sounds strange.
And one can go to the Securities Exchange Commission website, sec.gov, look for company listings. Now, companies are going to be listed under company listings.
Not under government listing.
I didn't see it
no
under...
such thing is in the Securities Commission listing the government, listing companies.
That's a very good point. I didn't see it listed under government listings, I see it listed under company listings. So we go in there and we type in Commonwealth.
So our little country is a company?
It appears that way.
That's very strange, Scott.
Now,
you really mean what you say? Because people who are watching us may just think, this guy is completely lulu. What's going on?
Well, the evidence is there. Now, what that does is it says we need to start asking a few more questions around that. Let's not just take it on its face value.
Yes.
Who can we find, who can we ask to see if that's really what's happening? Now, some of the people that I've asked about this have included the Governor-General, the Governor of Western Australia, Minister for Justice. Other friends of mine have asked Julia Gillard, Bob Carr, Nicola Roxon.
And what was the answer you got from these guys?
No answer.
No answer.
Not even a response to say, oh, we've got your letter, we'll get back to you. Nothing.
So people ignoring you.
Today,
what do you think why? Why this silence is happening?
Well, if you sit in court and you don't answer and you don't respond to charges that are laid against you, they attach a meaning to that.
Such as?
Default judgment. Anyone who's been kicked out of their house as a result of a mortgage foreclosure through default judgment will certainly attest to that, that if you don't attend and put up a defence, then you're labelled as guilty. And that's a principle that's applied worldwide. So as far as that as a principle, let's employ that, let's put that to these ministers and put the question to them,
And let's see what the answer is.
And if we
But
don't,
silence is not an answer, or it is an answer.
it is an answer. Unless, of course, that principle of default judgment is suddenly invalid, and there'll be a lot of people lining up to get their houses back. So you've got to have it one way or the other. You can't have it both.
Where is the headquarters of this company? Is it Canberra?
Its business address is listed as the embassy, Australian Embassy in Washington. And yet there are filings that relate back to Canberra.
So who is Canberra reporting to the Washington headquarters of the company, or the government, are politicians making a report to the company? So what do you think? What's happening?
Well, there's a few little bits of information on the SEC website that are essentially instructions to the filing or the filers of annual reports and prospectus items with this Securities Exchange Commission that are directing certain things be included in these annual reports or the filings that are registered. And I've heard arguments from a lot of people that suggest that the company is just a tool of the Australian government for the purposes of trading bonds.
No, but you don't need trading bonds, a tool. The government can sell, buy, whatever they like.
One would think so.
They can do it. Scott, we have to go for a short break, but stay with us, because after the break, we're coming back with much, much more with Scott.